In this module, we're going to build on something that we talked about in the earlier modules, and that's that your role as a programmer, we said, was writing the code that a computer can understand and execute. But what is that code that you're going to be writing? We did mention that it's going to be the rules that the computer needs to follow step by step, but what is that actually? So the core of writing programs is actually that you as the programmer are going to be doing a ton of problem solving. That's truly your primary role as a programmer because it's all about thinking about the problems that you want to solve and then putting them into code. So that means thinking about different scenarios, the rules that you need to follow in those scenarios, the different conditions for those rules, and the different outcomes that are produced when you follow those rules in particular orders. Because your role as a programmer is actually going to be primarily about problem solving, it's actually very interesting that you can actually take the idea of writing code and kind of put it in one bucket, and you can take the idea about problem solving and put it in this other bucket. Both of these buckets are very important, but I would say if you can't actually do the problem solving part, then the second bucket for the actual part for writing code is actually not going to be very important at all. And what I mean by that is if you can't actually think about the problem solving part of it, you don't have any code to go write. So many new programmers actually ask a ton of questions about, how do I write this code? What's the best syntax? What's the best programming language? And they're focused so much on the actual code writing part, and there's not a lot of emphasis put into problem solving. So I want this module for you to have the takeaway that problem solving is critical for being a programmer. In a later module, I'm going to touch on coding, programming versus software engineering, and I'll touch on this a little bit more to explain some of the differences. But again, I want this takeaway in this module for you to be that problem solving is paramount for your role as a programmer. So if we're thinking back to the earlier modules, and I was saying programs and software are all around us, we live in a digital world, right? Any industry you can think of has some sort of software that helps support it. How is it possible that we can apply problem solving and writing programs to all these different things? Well, a lot of the time it requires us to take complex problems and actually break them down into smaller problems. So to give you an example, and it's so complex we actually won't be able to walk through it in full in just this module, I want you to think about a website that allows users to buy products from it with their credit card. If I approached you as a programmer and said, hey, I have this problem where I want to be able to offer products to sell to customers, I want them to be able to put their credit card into my website, pick the products they want, and those products get delivered to their door. That's actually a really complex problem for you to go solve. So as a programmer, the first thing that you don't do is open up your coding tools and start writing code to go solve this. You actually need to think about breaking this problem down into smaller pieces. So some of the things you might consider are, okay, how does the user log in, if at all? How does the user see the different products that are available to purchase? How do we actually process the payment information? How do we get products shipped from the warehouse or wherever to the end user? What happens if the internet connection drops while they're making a purchase? What happens if the product runs out of stock? You can go down a complete rabbit hole thinking about how complex this problem actually is. And really, the only way that you can go solve it is by looking at smaller and smaller problems as part of the big picture and then breaking them down into more achievable pieces that you can deliver along the way. So again, we're not going to go through all the details of this example, but just to give you an idea, you could start by saying, okay, how do I make a website that can actually list products? And to break that problem down, you might say, okay, how do I actually store a list of products? Because the storing of the products in some location versus actually being able to display them to the user, that's actually two different sets of problems that you could go solve. So fundamentally, your role as a programmer is trying to think about these problems, breaking them down into smaller and smaller digestible problems that you can work on, and then from there, writing code to go solve these problems. So that's it for this module. Keep in mind, problem solving is critical, not just writing code.